go into today's show. Seriously, I've been contemplating my own mortality here as I get older. I have no children, and I've been thinking, what sort of a legacy do I want to leave? And the perfect opportunity has just possibly fallen into my lap. In studio today, we have with us Robert Stern. He is with the Minnesota College Savings Plan. He's the program manager. In all seriousness, Robert, this has been something I've been trying to consider. I mean, I'm not a millionaire or anything, but
right.
No, I wanted to be able to set aside some funds possibly for future generations to enjoy.
Right. We call that actually the legacy effect. You know, like you said, what's your legacy? And we like to feel that investing in whether it's a child, a grandchild, a relative, investing in the education of somebody you care about. I can't think of a better legacy.
Yeah, and you find a lot of friends and family, not just parents, grandparents, investing in, a sibling or a nephew or a niece or something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's just a great point. One of the things that people don't realize when they think of college savings and 529 plans like this is they tend to think, oh, this is just something I should do for my child. But the reality is that anyone can set up an account for anyone else. So you could be the account owner, and the beneficiary could be a relative, it could be a friend, it could be somebody you care about. It could even be yourself. We occasionally have we have people who set up accounts for themselves. You can do that as well.
No, that makes perfect sense. Anyway, I got a little ahead of myself there. I was thinking that the song was perfect going into today's show. We need to get a little background on Robert Stern. So give me a little of your background, if you would, please.
Sure. I'll be glad to do that. So I have been the program manager for the Minnesota College Savings Plan for about 3.5 years. And I work for a company called TIAA-CREF. Any of your listeners that are educators may recognize the name. Our company manages the Minnesota College Savings Plan for the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. Prior to this role, my wife and I owned a small direct marketing firm for about 22 years in the Twin Cities. So I've been around the advertising world for a while.
Yeah, been around the block, so to speak.
I guess you could say that.
And now really delving into the financial world too, because that's what this is all about, is investing.
Right, exactly. Kind of picking up on your last question, so I actually have always been interested personally in investments and finances, and this for me is kind of the best of both worlds, because I not only get to handle the marketing for a plan that I really believe in, but of course the heart of this is investments. How the money is invested. Our most popular option actually is what we call our age-based option, and what that means is that you put the age of the child, the grandchild, whoever is the beneficiary, and then our investment professionals manage the risk based on the time horizon. So if the beneficiary is 17, obviously you're going to take a different approach than if they're 2, and that's one of the beauties of these kinds of plans. I always like to tell people you don't have to be a stock market expert or even really like the stock market to do something like this, because what we like people to do is set up the plan and then go about their life after that.
The website is mnsaves.org. You have a nice website.
We do, and we just relaunched it actually here just a couple of weeks ago, and we have anything you'd want to know about college savings is on there. We have videos people can watch. We have information about how the plan works, about the investment angle, about events in the news, student debt, which is a big issue.
That I want to get to in our next segment. I got to take a little break here.
Okay, great.
It's only going to be a couple-minute break, so relax, and we'll come back, okay?
Appreciate it. Thank
Robert Stern, he is the program manager of the Minnesota College Savings Plan, the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. See here about saving for college in the future with the Minnesota College Savings Plan, Minnesota Office of Higher Education. Robert Stern is the program manager for Minnesota College Savings Plan. Does every state have something like this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gordy. Just about every state has something like this. Some states have more than one, so it can be kind of complicated out there. we always like to say, where you want to start is the plan for your own state, because there are usually reasons why you'd want to be in your state rather than one of the other ones.
Right. I found some interesting information. By the way, your test that you have on your website, I passed with flying colors.
That's good.
I only got 2 questions wrong, and the last one was a trick question.
Yes, that's true.
There's multiple choice.
Yes.
And the last question, just in case you take the test, folks, the last question, none of the answers are right.
That's right.
Or they're all right.
We just want to make sure you're paying attention, which you were.
You sly person. That way I couldn't ace the test.
Right.
I missed the first question, and then the last question.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We that's one of the things we did on our website is we started adding in those kinds of things to make it more interactive. Some of you asked about whether there are plans in other states. Some of the questions we get, that's one of them. We also get a question all the time. People say, well, do I have to use the money to go to school in Minnesota, even though it's the Minnesota plan? And the answer to that is no. You can use it at any accredited institution.
In the world.
Absolutely. In the U.S. and overseas. And that's important because most people do not know where their beneficiary is going to go to school. I mean,
right.
In the case of my kids, we didn't know until the last second. So there's flexibility that way. Another big one is, and I think this is one of the questions which sounds like you got right, is financial aid. So some people think if I save money in a plan like this, it is going to disqualify me or make it very hard to get financial aid. And the truth is, actually, that is not the case. You have to save an enormous amount of money for that to be the case. You'd have to save over $70,000, and our average account is about $19,000.
You know what blew my mind?
What's that?
What I read on your website, as little as $25
right.
get you in a plan. That's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. Obviously, you want to try to save more than that, but I always say it only takes 25 to start, but it's that first 25 that is the hardest. People, for whatever reason, this is something that people put off, that they just have trouble pulling the trigger on. So one of the reasons we lowered it down to 25 is to make it easy to get started.
Well, make it 25 a week, 100 a month,
yep.
1,200 a year. I mean, that all multiplies when you're starting to invest. I mean, I'm assuming that you pick plans that have a good return on the investment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all of the underlying funds are the TI-CREF funds we were talking about before, and they all have excellent ratings. And that is the whole idea, is to just start small, save whatever you can. One of our campaigns talks about, if you were to cut back on, say, lattes every week, how much you could save and how that would add up. Here's the key thing about saving for college that if your listeners take away nothing else, this is in my opinion the key thing. You do not need to save all of it, because nobody can do that. It's very difficult. What you need to do is save whatever you can, because that money will go against the expected family contribution, and that's the key fact. Most people their kids are going to get scholarships or work study or subsidized loans, some combination of things like that.
Well, just as an example, you were telling me before we hit the airwaves, you have a child at Carleton.
I do, yeah.
Over 90%, practically 100% of the students at Carleton receive some financial aid.
Absolutely, Gordy, that is such a great point. When my daughter first said she wanted to go there, I thought, oh wow, that's great, except what about the U? That would be so much less expensive.
Probably there's a little sticker shock there.
There is. But to your point, when it was all said and done, between her work study and the scholarships that they gave her and everything else, it's actually costing me a couple $1,000s less than it would have had she gone to the U.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and as you say, your point is really well taken. Most of the students there have some form of assistance. If the school wants you, they will work it out. And a lot of schools, Carleton is no exception, have big endowments. They have a lot of money to work with, and they're under increasing pressure from everybody, from alumni to politicians to everybody else, to use it. Still, though, the concern that we have is that the average undergraduate from the U, we were talking about the U, they graduate with about $30,000 in debt, and that's a lot. It's like, I always say, it's like having a a car, a really fancy car, let's say, without the car payment, without the car, you know, and that you can see that in the generation of kids that are graduating from college now. You know, they're living at home in record numbers, right?
Yes.
And they're delaying getting houses and buying cars and things like that. And part of it is because of the student debt. So we feel like we have a product that can help people avoid that pitfall. The real horror stories that you hear are people that go into the private loan market. So they call Discover Card or whoever, and they borrow money at, you know, ridiculous rates of interest, you know, 13, 15, 19%, and that's where you can really get in trouble. So we want to caution people about that type of thing. And then to your point from before, if they can just get started saving and make it a habit, and you know, save enough to where you don't even really miss it, you'd be amazed at the end if you can get up to that average 18, 19,000, how much difference that can make.
Does this make you ineligible for Pell Grants?
No, it actually doesn't. Another great question. Yeah, the Pell Grants, most of the grants, the main thing that the financial aid people look at is your income. That's the number one thing. The other thing, and this is something I always try to stress, any assets that are in the child's name before they go off to college, you want to get them out of their names. So your listeners may have heard of UGMA or UTMA accounts, Uniform Gift to Minors Act. Those accounts used to be very popular before 529s came into existence, and you do want to liquidate those, because those do count dollar for dollar. The school looks at it like that's money that should go towards education. But grants and scholarships, work study, all the things we were talking about, that's really a separate process from the 529 process.
I did want you to get out your crystal ball for a minute here, if
Okay.
you would, please. I would assume that you have done some projecting.
Yeah.
15, 20 years from now, what's a college education average going to cost?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost, it's such a painful thing to look at. You know, when you look at the cost of tuition, it's hard to think of anything that has escalated faster than that. I mean, it really is. And when the government talks about there's no inflation, well, they obviously aren't looking at the cost of college.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not inconceivable that the costs could literally double, you know, in the time frame you're talking about. Now, again, I think what we have working in our favor here is it's becoming so expensive now that you start to see all these articles about, you know, is college worth it? You know, and that's because of the debt factor. And again, I think a lot of the more the wealthier schools, let's call them the haves, they're under more and more pressure to use the resources they have. But you also you're starting to see proposals from politicians about making community college free, you know, providing an alternative for people, trade schools and other things that are not so financially crippling. So I think you're going to see major change in that area. What form it'll take, I guess I don't really know. But I'm pretty confident that if we were having this conversation 20, 25 years from now, the landscape won't look the same.
No. Well, you'll probably see more plans like the one that you're touting.
I think so. I think that's exactly right. People realize they have to plan ahead. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, maybe when you were a kid, I don't think that, I know my father would agree, they didn't have to plan for saving for college the way we do. And yet, you know, I think about, I also have an 8-year-old, and I'm always thinking, oh, I hope I'm on track for her. And you think about the absurdity of that in a way, right? I mean, she's going to college in 10, 11 years, and I'm worried about it now.
Well, that's good, though. I mean, you're a good parent.
I like to think so.
Not that kids that don't go to college aren't kids of good parents, too. I'm saying that.
No, well, you know what, you're alluding to something else that's really kind of important, and that we don't maybe talk about it enough. These plans don't have to just be used for 4-year college educations. They can be used for 2-year community colleges. They can be used for continuing education for trade schools, you know, beauty schools, anything accredited. And, you know, there's more and more people considering some of those kind of options. I read an article, one of my favorite articles talked about how there are some very good jobs. Caterpillar and other companies like that are looking for people for jobs that don't necessarily require college educations, but what they do require is to have some of those skills, you know, whether it's the math skills or reasoning or whatever that you would need to get into college, and that's kind of the issue. So one way or another, you need to become educated, but whether you have to do it in the traditional four-year path, I think, is somewhat open for discussions.
Yeah, you talk about the college debt. I have a niece who went to medical school.
Okay.
And she's paying over $1,000 a month on her loans.
Isn't that amazing?
That's just crazy. That's,
Yeah.
That's a house payment.
It is, and that's true. With graduate school, I think the figure I cited earlier was the $30,000 figure for undergraduates. You're talking about medical school,
Right.
law school. It's not uncommon for the debt loads to double or even triple. We do a lot of events, and I've seen graduate students at events that'll say, oh yeah, I have $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 in debt. Now, at least hopefully, maybe your niece is in this position, at least if you're graduating with a law degree or a medical degree, you do have that future earning power.
Well, yeah, she's making good money now as a doctor, but still.
No, you're right though. I know it's the house payment without the house, and that's really how things have changed. So that is the thing to try to avoid. I think that's the other thing that you're going to see. The schools, I think, are going to be under more and more pressure to offer more than just liberal arts degrees, because go back to that $30,000 figure. If you graduate from the U and you owe $30,000 and your degree is liberal arts, now you're not employable, so it makes it even worse, So I think that the two things kind of work together. The other thing we find is that when people save for college, there's two things that happen. One is by putting money aside for this, particularly in families where maybe people have not all gone to college, just the very act of saving gets them thinking more about going to college. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And the other thing is that this type of investing and saving has a way of trickling over into other things, saving for retirement, saving for a house, that kind of stuff. It's just a way to develop saving as a habit, which, it's like anything, right? If you keep doing it, you're going to get better at it. So.
Well, I find the painless way to save is to have it automatically withdrawn from your check. You never see the money.
Exactly.
That's the most painless way to save.
You're right, Gordy. That's the way to do it. We don't require that because we want to make the plans flexible.
Right.
But we highly recommend that. Have it withdrawn from your paycheck, have it automatically drafted out of an account, whatever. I mean, because all of a sudden you'll find you can live on less than you thought you could. And then your point before about how it compounds and adds up. I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to who say, yeah, I didn't really look at the statements for a while, and it was just, and all of a sudden I looked at it and there was a lot more there than I thought, and so that's what we hope to try to accomplish. And we try to make it as easy as possible. You mentioned the website before, but we also have a field consultant in our Bloomington office. His name is Chris McLeod. You can make an appointment with him by going to our website. He's not on commission. He will work to help people answer questions. That's what we're there to do. We're not there to pressure anybody. We just want to help make the process easier for people.
The other thing I saw on your website, which if I had kids would be a plus, well, even if I don't have kids, it's
Right.
a plus, but this is tax deductible.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't pay taxes on it, is what I'm saying.
Right. Right. Exactly. So I should explain that. So the way that works is that you do put in after-tax dollars into the plan, but to your point, when you take the money out at the end of the line, all of the taxes that you would normally pay on the gains. So let's say you put in $10,000 and at the end it's worth 20.
Yeah.
You do not have to pay taxes on that extra 10. That's huge because if you're saving outside of a plan.
Oh, you could say that again.
Yeah.
I do a little stock investing.
You do know that. So yeah, you know all about that, how that works.
Yeah,
so
capital gains there.
Yeah, there is one other element to this that I'd love to mention. One of the things that we're working on, and we've been working on it for a while, is if we could create a tax incentive on the front end. So if you put money in, then you'd immediately get a tax credit or a tax break. There are some states that have that. There are bills that came out of both the State House and State Senate this last time around that proposed just that. Of course, none of those bills were ultimately considered in that whole situation. But this year...
Well, they're declining some revenue for themselves when they do that. So.
Yeah, and they can't agree on anything, as we know. But this next time around, the surplus is going to be even larger. There's going to be even more pressure on these folks in an election year to accomplish something. And creating tax incentives for a plan like this is something that actually appeals to people on both sides of the aisle. Just so they all want to take credit for it, of course. And if it happens, that's what you'll see is a press conference with everybody from claiming they were part of it. But if that happened, our plan is already 1.2 billion in size, but if that happened, you would see it increase exponentially.
The other thing I like about this is you give people, you mentioned earlier about options.
Yes.
You give people, you said age-based investment is your most popular.
It is.
But you also give them a guaranteed, a multi-fund, or a single fund option.
Yeah. Again, thank you for mentioning that, Gordy. We have 11 different options. So for someone like you that maybe knows a little something about investing, we have options that range from, say, the international option, or we have an option that's an index base that tracks the S&P 500.
Higher risk, lower risk.
Exactly. We have aggressive. We have conservative. On the conservative end, we have something called principal plus interest, or as you mentioned, it's sometimes referred to as guaranteed. And that works kind of the way the old money markets used to. So right now it's paying 1.4%. I never thought I'd be in a position where I would saying 1.4% is this phenomenal return.
It actually is.
But now it is.
Isn't that sad?
Isn't it? It really is sad, isn't it? But when a savings account is paying 0.001 or whatever it is, 0.0001, to make 1.4 is not bad. That option's popular among people that want to try to protect their principal. So we do see people in there for that.
And there are other, obviously, higher.
Oh, correct. Correct.
In other plans.
Correct. Again, you need to think about this in the long term. But a couple of years ago, when the stock market was recovering, our main equity-based option had like a 28% return for that year, so it was pretty good. But of course, that's one slice in time, as we all know.
Yeah. Well, my dad always used to say, always think long term when you're investing.
Yep. What's the classic line? It's not timing the market, it's time in the market.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Again, Bob, it's Robert or Bob.
Either one, whatever you like.
Stern is the program manager of the Minnesota College Savings Plan, which means exactly, what?
Well, my job is I do all the marketing and the PR like this, and I set up all of the events and promotions and things.
So you don't do the actual investing?
No. We have professional. I know just enough about that to be dangerous. So we have actual professionals that do that. That's all they do. And the funds. I should mention the funds that underlie these investments have won some major awards. Lipper, which follows mutual fund investing, has given these funds the top rating the last 3 years. So.
I have to tell you, I was thrown off a bit.
What's that?
Well, the website, Boston, Massachusetts, is like the headquarters of this.
Well, yeah, it's a little confusing. And I should explain that. So, we use a company called BFDS, and they are based in Boston. That handles. They're part of State Street, if you're kind of familiar with them. So they handle the mutual fund processing and all of the paperwork that kind of goes. So that's why people, if you're sending in checks, that's where you're sending it. But again, they work for the Minnesota College Savings Plan and for our company. My company, TICREF, is based in Charlotte. So, we're kind of everywhere. Here in Minnesota, though, I mentioned Chris before. He's in our Bloomington office, and we have TICREF has a small office in Bloomington. And I'm actually based in Plymouth, so we're right here in town.
Yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. You were
No,
saying
you didn't.
something.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've really enjoyed this, Gordy. I really appreciate your taking the time to explore this with us.
Yeah, I only have a couple more minutes left in the show. And the main reason I wanted to do this is, we always like to let our listeners know about stuff like this.
Sure.
Because it's extremely important. Now, you mentioned earlier about the number of kids that are staying at home with their parents and delaying actually starting their lives.
Correct.
Because they have so much college debt, and it just is a shame.
It is. I think that's, to me, the biggest byproduct of the increased in tuition. A quick story I can tell you about that. When I was working at Ameriprise, which is where I was before this, I was working with people that were about half my age. I career switched into this from advertising, as I mentioned to you, and I was working with financial professionals here, people that were in finance. It was in the brokerage area. And every one of them, literally all the people I worked with, were either renting or they were living at home with their parents. And these again are the financially savvy end of the the millennial spectrum, so to speak. And I remember I had several conversations with these guys. This is back in 2011, and I'm saying, look, interest rates, how much lower can they go? The housing market still has not recovered. What are you waiting for? Get out there, buy a house, buy an apartment, get going. And they all would say the same thing. I'm living at home, I'm renting, the student loans. It was a thing that really weighed on them. You could just sort of feel it. And the government's gotten a little better since then in terms of consolidating loan debt.
Well, the president wants to, provide a free education.
Yep, he does. And I don't know honestly how practical that is, but I understand where he's coming from. And I think you'll see more of that as we move forward.
Well, I am in the final minute of the program
Okay.
here, so how can people get more information? Obviously, your website, mnsaves.org.
Yeah, that would be the best thing, mnsaves.org, and so MN as in Minnesota, and then saves, SAVES.org. But again, I want to mention Chris McLeod, my colleague, terrific guy, very low-key. Again, he's there to answer questions. I'll just say his number real quick. It's 952-830-3127. Again, 952-830-3127. You can call Chris and make an appointment if you want, but you can also go on the website, use our scheduling tool. And then I just will add real quickly, this type of a product, there's a long lag time. So it sometimes can be as long as a year. So I would tell your listeners, just get the information and figure out what's right for you, and go from there.
All right, thanks. Appreciate that. Robert Stern, Minnesota College Savings Plan.